I am an inept alpha, yet upon my father's demise, I inherited all his wealth. This includes my enchanting omega stepmother. She is a beguiling and captivating beauty, a parasitic flower that cannot thrive without an alpha. The world perceives my possession of her as an act of ruthless acquisition. They fail to see the myriad marks concealed beneath my garments, nor the glands that have been repeatedly licked and bitten. 1. The day of my father's funeral was marked by a relentless downpour. It was also the first occasion I encountered my nominal stepmother. Dressed in a sleek black suit, he epitomized every notion I held of an omega, save for his towering stature. He was delicate, exquisite, and alluring, reminiscent of a tendril swaying precariously in the tempest. At 15, I had undergone my transformation into an alpha, albeit one of the lowest rank. The moment my father laid eyes on the diagnostic report, he expelled me from our home. I often found myself questioning whether I was truly his biological child, for his cruelty seemed unfathomable. Yet now, I was compelled to believe otherwise. My blood coursed with the same essence as his, for I too yearned for this omega. 2. I returned to the Zhou residence. After my father's death, there was no one to oversee my affairs. Naturally, no one objected to my return. The lawyer presented the will and an array of documents, stating that my father had bequeathed all his estate to me. I listened in a daze, grasping only a singular point. Since I inherited my father's entire fortune, that beautiful omega should rightfully belong to me as well, no? 3. After bidding farewell to the lawyer, I turned around only to find him standing behind me. It was he. I hesitated to refer to him as my stepmother, for that term incessantly reminded me of the person who stood between us. The omega was alarmingly close enough that I could almost detect the scent of his pheromones. It was not the sickly sweet aroma, but rather a delicate blend of elegance intertwined with a hint of aggression. Not reminiscent of typical omega pheromones nor of alpha. My breath quickened, and I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. I fumbled for words, unsure of how to initiate conversation. Yet he shattered the silence first. Hello, I am Pei Yi. His voice, rich and resonant, lingered in my ears. I dazedly raised my gaze to meet his, only to realize he stood slightly taller than I. Indeed, a lower-ranked alpha, whose omega exceeded my height. I chuckled to myself at the absurdity. With a slight easing of tension, I exhaled and offered a smile. I am Zhou Ling. Nice to meet you. Pei Yi. Surely, addressing him by name was permissible. Would he consider it impolite? To my surprise, he scrutinized my face for an extended moment. Then he raised his hand to caress my cheek. His fingers were long and his palm broad. He chuckled in astonishment, as though a cat had just discovered a cherished toy. Your face is quite small. I was unsure whether this constituted a compliment. As I opened my mouth to reply, he shifted his wrist, enveloping my nose and mouth with his palm, leaving only my eyes exposed. The air was severed. I felt a hint of asphyxiation and instinctively grasped his wrist. I then heard him say, "This is quite beautiful." For this position was rather inappropriate. Regardless of the context, it verged on the scandalous. I pried his hand away and finally managed to utter, "You are quite handsome as well." I often received compliments on my appearance. For an alpha, this was not necessarily a boon. Yet I had grown accustomed to it. In my eyes, however, he was truly captivating. I had never encountered an omega quite like him, and I struggled to articulate it. It was a beauty that blurred the lines of gender. "Thank you, Ling Ling. Can I call you that?" His eyes sparkled with mischief. I doubted anyone could refuse him. After receiving my consent, he took my hand and led me through the garden back to the living room. Along the way, the gardener and staff bowed their heads low in our presence, seemingly oblivious to our peculiar AO dynamic. They appeared somewhat intimidated by Pei Yi, yet he exuded a gentle demeanor. I pondered this oddity until my chin was lifted by an undeniable force. "Ling Ling, what are you thinking about?" 5. Coming back to my senses, I replied casually, "Thinking about you." His movements faltered. "Really?" His voice unexpectedly husky. I nodded honestly. In the next instant, I felt warmth brush against my face as he leaned down to kiss me, laughter bubbling forth from his throat. So obedient. 6. I had once encountered a post online suggesting that many believed the phrase "so obedient" to be the epitome of dirty talk. At the time, I dismissed it. Now, however, I found it undeniably accurate. Almost instantaneously, my meager pheromones began to seep from my glands, cautiously entwining themselves around him. The once faint and nearly imperceptible scent had now solidified, transforming into tendrils that clung to Pei Yi, on his legs, his waist, his neck, saturating him with my essence. I held my breath, eagerly anticipating his reaction. If only he were. If only you were my Omega, I murmured to myself. I had thought my voice soft enough to go unnoticed, yet Pei Yi captured my foolish longing with precision. His expression momentarily stiffened, the smile fading. Only an Omega? What? I was bewildered by his meaning. Yet he scrutinized me with an inscrutable gaze for an extended period. He straightened up, creating distance between us. His demeanor calm and detached as if the kiss had never transpired. Rein in your pheromones. After all, I am still your father's Omega. 7. I could not shake the feeling that he emphasized the term Omega. Yet at that moment all I registered was his assertion of our relationship. He was underscoring that he belonged to my father, not to me. A chilling wave coursed through my veins. My pheromones receded, losing their vibrancy. I watched him retreat into the living room, vanishing from sight. My fists clenched tightly, nails digging into my flesh. In the suffocating silence, I laughed. If he could be my father's, then why couldn't he be mine? 8. It was only later that I learned he had never belonged to my father. He had always been mine. 9. From that day forth, he became increasingly preoccupied. Even under the same roof, our encounters grew scant. Each morning, upon waking, I would catch a glimpse of his dapper figure departing. Enchanting, that day's kiss lingered in my mind like a fleeting, vivid dream, evaporating upon awakening. I did not believe myself to possess the allure to warrant his deliberate avoidance. I sensed that even as an Omega, he held a dominant stance between us. Thus, I convinced myself that he was genuinely busy. Yet what could he possibly be occupied with? I attempted to inquire with the butler, the maid, the staff. Yet, without exception, they remained tight-lipped regarding Pei Yi. I often wondered whether the authority he exuded stemmed from my father or from his own formidable presence. I could not say for certain, but I leaned towards the latter. My curiosity would soon find its answer. 10. It was a bright morning when I rose early, finally synchronizing my appearance at the breakfast table with Pei Yi before he departed. Pei Yi, good morning. He replied succinctly, morning. Curt response devoid of my name. An inexplicable restlessness stirred within me. The back of my neck throbbed subtly, and my canines tingled. It was a precursor to my sensitive period. Oddly, my cycles were typically punctual. Why had they suddenly advanced? With no time for contemplation, I hastily swallowed my food. As Pei Yi set down his coffee cup, I declared, I'll be staying out for the next few days. Though I longed for him, I was not inclined to exploit my sensitive period. A solitary alpha and a solitary omega cohabiting was indeed a test of my self-restraint. I resolved to spend my sensitive period at a hotel and return to pursue him thereafter. Even though I believed he would not mind whether I stayed at home or moved out, I still felt compelled to inform him. Pei Yi halted his motion of turning away. At that moment, he stood backlit, the light casting a stark contrast across his face. His expression was inscrutable as he softly echoed my words. Moving out? I clarified, it's just temporary. I will return in a few days. Being a married Omega, he should comprehend this. He said nothing, and I took it as his acquiescence. However, from the corner of my eye, I noticed his left hand incessantly fidgeting with the cufflink of his right sleeve. The diamond cufflink seemed to have transformed into a mere substitute, causing the fabric of his sleeve to wrinkle. Frowning slightly, I was about to remind him when he nodded and once again unveiled that breathtaking smile I had first encountered. All right, I understand. The sound of the villa's door closing did not initially strike me as unusual. It was only when I finished packing my belongings and dragged my suitcase downstairs that I realized the villa was utterly deserted, the staff having vanished without a trace. Moreover, the door would not budge. Confused, I fiddled with the lock. In the vast emptiness, my voice echoed back to me. More critically, I discovered that my phone had lost signal. I could neither make calls nor send messages. It felt as though I had been transported to a deserted island. I was stunned. Was this the opening scene of a suspense film? As if fate had conspired against me, my pheromones, influenced by my emotional turmoil, became agitated. My senses heightened, my canines ached, and my glands throbbed, prompting a primal urge to bite and release. I exhaled a hot breath. As I returned to my room with my suitcase, I absent-mindedly contemplated that perhaps locking the door might have been an option. Surely someone would return by nightfall, at least preventing me from starving. Yet, The moment I pushed the door open and turned to close it, a powerful force surged from behind, pinning me against the wall. The room remained shrouded in darkness, devoid of light. My startled cry was swallowed in my throat. The person restraining me pressed me between his body and the door, rendering me immobile, my hands reluctantly resting on his shoulders, rising and falling with his muscular movements. Typically, during my sensitive periods, my reactions would be dulled. Yet this time, I instantly recognized who it was and felt an unexpected surge of anger. Pei Yi, what are you doing? Does he not realize that scaring someone could be fatal? At this juncture, even the dimmest of minds could discern that Pei Yi had ordered the door locked, trapping me inside. Why would he do such a thing? The more I pondered, the more I was engulfed by a nameless fury, my emotions colliding within me without an outlet. The initial warmth I had felt upon our first meeting, the subsequent coldness, and now this bizarre behavior. His unpredictable methods made me feel like a fish caught on a hook, my emotions manipulated at his whim. Very well, if this is the case, who is not capable of fishing? In a fit of frustration, my fingers swiftly glided backward, 3 fingers expertly pressing against his glands, teasingly exploring. If this is how it must be, then let us both plunge into this abyss. Pei Yi, if you remain silent, I shall assume you deeply desire to be with me. Don't worry, I shall be gentle. I will not cause you pain. Pei Yi said nothing, and in the confined space, only my hurried breaths punctuated the silence. Time seemed to stretch indefinitely, yet it could have merely been a matter of seconds. He smiled. What followed was an overwhelming, suffocating kiss. The proximity of our bodies revealed his excited response in its entirety. His lips brushed against mine, trembling. Come on, baby, let us see who marks whom. He was so audacious. Was he playing a game of passion with me? It was not entirely unwelcome. I was no staunchly masculine alpha. As an omega, if he wished to bite, let him bite. Could he truly mark me? Pei Yi chuckled softly, his fervent kisses landing on the nape of my neck, igniting a shiver. This is your doing, baby, you asked me to bite. Enough with the nonsense. After his turn, it was my moment. Almost instantaneously, I felt an indescribable sting at my glands, as if a hook were ruthlessly extracting them from my body. The pain was excruciating. I could not help but let out a cry, only to stifle it in my throat. My rapid breaths betrayed my suffering. Is that enough now? It's my turn, right? I desperately tried to ignore the discomfort emanating from my glands and the peculiar sensations from behind me, struggling to turn him over, facing Pei Yi's smooth glands. Huh? Smooth? My dazed thoughts suddenly cleared. Why? Had he never been marked by his father? This realization sent my pheromones into a frenzy, clamoring to possess this exquisite omega, still unclaimed by anyone. With newfound resolve, I lunged forward, my canines poised to bite. A bite. I couldn't penetrate.
Pei Yi sitifledi laf.
His hands supporting my nearly dazed form as he effortlessly lifted me. Let me handle this laborious task. The next morning, my biological clock roused me at the usual time. I turned over, only to be met with an overwhelming sense of fatigue, particularly around my nape, where my glands throbbed with pain. I froze, abruptly recalling everything that had transpired the previous night. The absurdities I had previously overlooked now fell into place. His towering physique, the aggressive pheromones, the way people treated him. I found myself laughing in disbelief at this outrageous conclusion. Pei Yi was not an omega? After all the efforts his father had exerted to rid him of countless suitors, all to grant him the title of Mrs. Zhou, only to end up marrying someone stronger than him. An alpha? Or perhaps even stronger than an alpha. Shaking off my thoughts, I bore the overwhelming soreness and stood up to dress. My body felt surprisingly clean, as if it had been tended to. Upon opening the door, I inquired of the staff, "Where is Pei Yi?" That dog, thinking he could just run off after our encounter. I had to see if my fists would agree. The staff, maintaining a respectful distance from my peculiar stance, replied with precision, "Mr. Pei left early this morning, instructing you to rest well." Oh, rest well. Did he ever provide me the opportunity to rest during our escapades yesterday? Clenching my jaw, I waved the staff away, limping toward the staircase when I abruptly halted. After a moment's struggle, I resolutely turned around and walked down the corridor, stopping before the last room. This was Pei Yi's chamber. To be honest, it is morally dubious to sneak into someone else's room without their knowledge. Yet I could not care less at this moment. I needed to uncover his true identity. Even if I might not find the complete truth, Having a clue was better than remaining entirely passive. I twisted the doorknob, and to my surprise, the door opened. This saved me the trouble of searching for a key. Pei Yi's room was starkly different from his exquisite appearance. It was adorned in shades of black, white, and gray, with minimal decoration and sparse furniture. A distinct air of emotional detachment lingered. If only he genuinely were emotionally detached. Shaking my head, I surveyed the room, and as my gaze fell upon the neatly made bed, I suddenly froze. The bedding was immaculate, devoid of any creases. I felt justified in removing my shoes and climbing onto the bed, swiftly lifting the pillow. An article of clothing came into view, mine. This utterly ordinary t-shirt, lost after I had taken it off one day, now lay beneath his pillow. Each night, he had been falling asleep, separated only by a pillow, inhaling the scent of his nominal stepson. Holding the shirt, I felt as though I were clutching a hot potato. Uncontrollably, my thoughts wandered to how Pei Yi might find solace in this piece of clothing. Would he think of me? The disquiet of being observed caused me to tremble slightly, yet it was swiftly accompanied by an inexplicable thrill. As I lifted the garment with trembling hands, the scent that belonged to Pei Yi immediately enveloped my senses, wrapping around me as if it were alive, vying for my attention. How peculiar. While I scorned the situation, my cheeks flushed as I neatly folded the clothing and returned it beneath my pillow. He had been so haughty, indifferent to me, yet secretly taking my clothes. I wondered what mischief I had unwittingly committed. Sitting dazed on the edge of my bed, I was taken aback by Pei Yi's obsessive behavior, having long since cast aside the purpose for which I had entered. It was only when a familiar, unsettling sensation surged from behind me that I jolted back to reality. Springing to my feet, dismissing my errant thoughts, I silently repeated to myself, Pei Yi, identity, identity, Pei Yi. The safe was futile. What about the bedside drawer? Tentatively pulling open the first drawer, I found it predictably locked. Undeterred, I continued to tug at it. Upon reaching the third drawer, it finally gave way. A surge of joy filled my heart, but in my eagerness, I inadvertently pulled out photographs, scattering them across the floor. Upon closer inspection, I realized the images depicted none other than myself. I had never been fond of selfies, and the number of photos of me in my phone gallery was scant. Since I could remember, I had never seen my mother, and my father certainly wouldn't take pictures of me. Therefore, when confronted with these evidently candid photographs, my initial reaction was not panic, but rather an indescribable tingling in my heart. There I was, strolling in the rain, reading alone, feeding stray cats, even in moments of vulnerability, all captured in his lens. I was the protagonist in his narrative, no longer the marginalized alpha of lesser status. How strange. It felt as though I was wholly cherished by the owner of the camera. After taking several deep breaths to quell my excitement, I began to gather the scattered photographs, only to be drawn to a blank piece of paper at the bottom. Extracting it revealed a medical record. My heart raced uncontrollably. I had a hunch that the answers I sought lay within. As I flipped to the first page, Pei Yi's youthful photograph appeared in the upper right corner, still bearing a hint of naivety, yet his beauty was already unmistakable. Skimming past the less significant details, I froze upon reading the description of the condition. Pheromone. Mutation? What did this imply? Secondary differentiation, gender identification result. Enigma. Primary manifestations. Absence of sensitivity and estrus periods. Ability to autonomously control pheromone release. If proactive, can mark individuals or induce conception. Note. Individuals include all three ABO genders. After reading it 3 times, I confirmed that my comprehension was intact. Thus, Pei Yi was neither O nor A, but rather an E capable of marking A, and more formidable than A. Moreover, he could. Young master. My chaotic thoughts were abruptly interrupted by an unexpected voice. My heart leaped, and I instantly sprang up, concealing the medical record behind me. Simultaneously, I berated myself for having forgotten to lock the door. A subordinate with downcast eyes stood before me, holding a tailored suit of exquisite fabric, a modern design reminiscent of high-end couture. Swallowing hard, I inquired, "What is it?" Mr. Pei called back, requesting that you accompany him to the birthday banquet of young Master He this evening. Once I had tidied everything up, I returned to my room to don the suit. The waistline and shoulder seems fit perfectly, even better than my own purchases. For reasons unknown, I picked up my phone and casually took a photograph. In a burst of spontaneity, I clicked into Pei Yi's WeChat and sent him the picture. Pei Yi replied instantly, "Looks good." I responded, "How do you have my measurements?" They were more precise than I even knew. After a prolonged silence from him, I set my phone down to fix my hair. When I picked it up again, I found, "I measured you personally yesterday. Your figure is fantastic." Personally measured. I felt a mix of indignation and inability to refute. Blushing, I typed furiously, "I don't like hearing that. Take it back." He replied in an instant, "I was wrong, baby." 2 minutes later, he added, "I can't take it back." Yay, how shameless. Perhaps it was the newfound understanding of Pei Yi's true identity that altered my perception of him significantly. I once viewed him as beautiful and aloof, akin to a celestial moon, subtly tugging at my heartstrings. However, this impression was swiftly shattered by his kiss, his fervor, the clothing beneath my pillow, and the photographs in the drawer. He had morphed into a dominant, obsessive figure, like a shadowy specter, scrutinizing me from every angle. Did I dislike this? No, I reveled in it, being watched, possessed, regarded as his belonging. His clandestine and fervent affection was like a puzzle piece desperately trying to fit into my life. As it pressed in, I stood on the verge of explosion. Others might find it painful, yet I found it intoxicating, as though I were enveloped in a meticulously tailored embrace, the kind of security that became addictive. So, Pei Yi, come love me, come hold me. I under your control, and you moved by me. Such a perfect match. Reclaiming my thoughts, I slipped my phone into my pocket and, upon exiting the vehicle, spotted Pei Yi standing at the entrance. He was clad in a white suit, tall and commanding, even more so than the alphas passing by. I couldn't help but wonder how they felt being overshadowed by an O. Raising an eyebrow, I glanced down at my black suit, a subtle thrill coursing through me. Within the opulent banquet hall, amid elegantly attired men and women, we were a striking contrast of black and white, seamlessly intertwined, reminiscent of that sultry night. "Let us go, little mom." It was a teasing appellation. Though he did not voice it, I could surmise that he and my father were not in a genuine marital relationship. Pei Yi inclined his head, maintaining his cool facade. Yet his gaze unabashedly roamed from my head to my feet, lingering on my waist, which had been accentuated. As he observed, he twisted a familiar cufflink. "Let us go." He approached and linked his arm with mine. Just as I thought he might acknowledge the moniker, he casually added, "Baby." "Very well then. I shall call you little mom, and you shall call me baby. Let us each have our own terms." Pei Yi was taller than I, and the way he held my arm was slightly awkward. I withdrew my hand, adjusting my stance so that I was now linked with him. A smile flickered in his eyes, which I caught. The consequence of this shift was immediate. Upon entering, all eyes turned toward us. The distinguished elite maintained their composure, engaging in light conversation amid the music, yet their eyes betrayed them. I felt somewhat uneasy, especially when Pei Yi was summoned by a refined middle-aged gentleman. I distanced myself from the dance floor and began nibbling on a small cake at the long table. By the time I reached the second piece, I overheard muffled yet lewd laughter from a corner. "Tsk tsk, that useless alpha from the Zhou family is actually flirting with his father S Omega. Indeed, it's baffling. What does he have going for him? Is he particularly skilled in bed? Looks like old Zhou's coffin lid is about to burst. I'm not too shabby either. Maybe I should try to conquer Pei Yi? Ha ha ha." Upon hearing this, I nearly choked on my food. After gulping down some water, I composed myself. My inner turmoil remained placid, and I even felt a hint of amusement. If not for the constraints of my identity, I would have been tempted to offer them some advice. "Go ahead. I support you in sending chrysanthemums from afar." Amused by my own thoughts, I could not suppress a smile that crept onto my lips. However, upon raising my gaze, I found a figure standing before me, observing me with keen interest. "Lawyer Fong?" I exclaimed in surprise. Was this not the attorney handling my father's estate? "Young Master Zhou, you may simply call me Fong Shi," he replied, lifting his wineglass, shedding the image of a career-driven elite man and transforming into a dandy. "Do you wish to know how they figured it out?" "What do you mean?" He set down his glass and suddenly leaned closer to me, the rich aroma of wood wafting from his person. After a moment, he straightened up, his nostrils flaring slightly. "You reek of Pei Yi's scent." A sly smile played on his lips, as if he were concocting some mischief. And here, as he reached towards me, something seemed to strike him, and his elbow bent in another direction, pointing at the nape of his own neck. "Here there are bite marks. It seems the battle was quite fierce." "Damn." I had rushed out and forgotten to cover up. I touched my gland awkwardly and managed to stammer. You won't tell anyone, will you? Truth be told, I wouldn't mind if it were to be disclosed. I simply wondered if it would affect Pei Yi. Feng Shi remained silent, scrutinizing me with a knowing expression for a moment before changing the subject. Do you trust him so implicitly? I replied cautiously. Who? Pei Yi? Of course. He is a member of the Zhou family. My Zhou man. He chuckled softly. Ask him if he acknowledges himself as a member of the Zhou family. What was with his condescension? I frowned and said, just say what you mean. He became serious. I mean, even if you are a marginal figure, you should be aware of Hongan Pharmaceutical, right? I responded, of course. The Zhou family built its fortune in biopharmaceuticals. Then do you know who the largest shareholder of Hongan is? My heart skipped a beat, a suspicion bubbling up within me. However, I retorted, whoever it is, it has nothing to do with me. He saw through my facade and incisively remarked, you guessed it, didn't you? Now, take a wild guess how Pei Yi managed to oust your father and ascend to his position. I became somewhat impatient, my tone turning sharp. Guessing? Why should I guess? Whose Hongan is it to me? If Pei Yi has the ability to manage it well, that's his skill. If you disagree, then you can oust him yourself. His words initially struck me with astonishment. I finally understood what Pei Yi had been preoccupied with during those days. Yet it was merely astonishment. If you intend to sow discord between us, you have chosen the wrong path. Suddenly, a mischievous thought crossed my mind. I leaned closer and whispered, I would rather he take over the company. He loves me to death, and what is his is mine. The confession felt somewhat shameful, and after a moment's pause, I continued, I love him to death as well. Observing his rare speechlessness, I pressed on, and do you think Zhou Shu is a good person? Zhou Shu was my father. He fixed his gaze upon me, and after half a minute, he burst into laughter. He even said, you were a little white rabbit. You seem to know quite a bit. Just because I don't speak of certain matters doesn't mean I am unaware. Those powerless memories from my youth had been sealed away with Zhou Shu's demise. I had no desire to bring them up. I waved my hand, preparing to find Pei Yi when Feng Shi swiftly slipped something into my pocket. His movements so quick that I barely registered what had occurred. What was that? I reached in and felt a USB drive. Sure, he winked conspiratorially. It's a treasure. Everything you wish to know is right here. After the banquet concluded, Pei Yi and I rode home together. My mind was elsewhere, fixated on the USB drive in my pocket. What I yearned to know pertained solely to Pei Yi. I hardly paid attention to the real Pei Yi sitting beside me. Pei Yi, too, was uncharacteristically silent. At that moment, I failed to notice this detail. As soon as we arrived, I dashed back to my room. After locking the door, I plugged in the USB drive to my computer. It contained a compressed file filled with countless photographs and several videos. Holding my breath, I clicked on the first image. It was Pei Yi's personal information from the federal system, with his marital status circled in red. Unmarried. Though I had long suspected this, I still felt a flicker of joy at that moment. Sliding to the second photo with a sense of glee, the visual shock caused me to gasp sharply. Blood. Pure blood. Pei Yi lay sidewise on an iron bed, his gland a gruesome mess, the pristine white sheets beneath him soaked red. Beside him, Zhou Shu held a scalpel, grinning at the camera like a devil. When the knocking at the door echoed, I mechanically stood, feeling like a lost soul. As my reason gradually returned, Pei Yi was already standing before me, clad in soft loungewear, resembling a handsome prince, as if he had never endured any harm. My heart sank as I recalled the computer screen still aglow, facing Pei Yi. In a frantic rush, I turned to shut it down, but my slipper snagged on the wool carpet, and I stumbled, only to be caught by a strong arm. Be careful, he admonished softly, seemingly unaware of the computer screen. Just as I was beginning to relax, he suddenly remarked lightly, you saw it. I was rendered speechless, standing there in a daze. After a moment, the emotion of concern surged within me. Rising on my toes, I embraced his broad shoulders, my fingers delicately grazing his gland, fearful of applying too much pressure. Does it still hurt? Pei Yi remained silent for a long while, his body trembling slightly, his hand gripping my waist with a force that felt like he was trying to merge me into his being. He said, it once hurt a lot, but it no longer does. A simple statement that broke the dam of my tears. Pei Yi released me and kissed away my tears, the one who had suffered now comforting me. Don't cry. I returned the favor tenfold. He spoke with a nonchalant attitude, yet his eyes instinctively sought my reaction. Did he fear I would blame him? I wiped my tears and leaned in to kiss his lips. He seemed surprised but quickly reciprocated. After the kiss, I whispered near his ear, "You did wonderfully. You accomplished what I have long wished to do but never could." Pei Yi did not exhibit a significant reaction, yet his excited demeanor spoke volumes. We embraced, his scent enveloping me completely. Through his fragmented narration, I gleaned some truths. For instance, how Zhou Shu exploited the reputation and technology of Hongan Pharmaceutical to conceal his heinous human experiments. How Pei Yi and Feng Shi escaped from the laboratory, transforming into two daggers plunged into Zhou Shu's heart, and that they had gathered evidence, including a list of many high-ranking officials from Hongan, which would be delivered to the president of the alliance the next day, with the first lady being one of the victims of the gland experiments. Zhou Shu has been obsessively pursuing gland evolution, deluding himself into thinking he could possess abilities stronger than high-level A, unaware that biological evolution does not favor anyone. Enigma is innate and cannot be attained through crude gland surgery. Power is addictive and drives one insane. I merely wielded a fake, utterly fake so-called enigma gland, and he granted all my demands, eagerly agreeing to replace his gland. He walked into death in pain yet with peace. Zhou Shu, who had flaunted his arrogance for a lifetime, met his demise due to his own foolishness. I shook my head and stepped off the bed, retrieving another USB drive from my suitcase. It was from the day after I had differentiated into a low-level alpha at the age of 15. I captured the harrowing scene of Zhou Shu hastily dragging away several bloodied individuals. I made a backup and sent one copy to the Alliance Police Bureau. However, I received no further communication. At that moment, I merely assumed Zhou Shu was committing murder, unaware of the extent of his depravity. I cannot ascertain whether his descent into madness was provoked by my demotion to a lower tier A. Pei Yi took the USB drive from me, cradled me in his lap, and expressed his disapproval of my perspective. His tone bore a stark warning. "This is none of your concern. If you continue to indulge in such fanciful thoughts, I would not hesitate to do something that would make you forget him." Grasping his hand that had slipped beneath my garment, I feigned indifference and began to dredge up old grievances. "How about explaining why there are so many photographs of me in your room? And why my clothes found their way beneath your pillow? Pei Yi was momentarily taken aback. Embarrassed, he nestled into the crook of my neck, akin to a large dog. "You saw everything." "Indeed I did." "That's splendid." He transitioned from nuzzling to kissing, peppering my neck with gentle pecks. "I am a rather vile person." "You certainly are." I referred to other aspects. "No," he shook his head. "I am far worse than you can imagine." At the outset of the investigation into Zhou Shu, he was exceedingly cautious, and I could glean little information. Later, by chance, I discovered he had a son, whom he had cast out. This presented a golden opportunity. It could very well be the key to toppling Zhou Shu. I began to investigate you, trailing your movements, discreetly capturing images of you as you commuted to and from school, as you fed cats and played with dogs, as you charged into the rain without an umbrella, oblivious, and as you volunteered at an orphanage and nursing home. I became so consumed by it that it morphed into an obsession. When Feng Shi suggested he take responsibility for you, I declined, declaring that Zhou Shu was a devil, yet had sired a naive son. Since he had wronged me, let his son make amends. I watched you grow from 15 to 20, from high school to university, evolving from solitude to gradually forming a small circle of friends. I pondered how it was possible. How could you smile so beautifully at others? How could you show such concern for them? Yet you remained oblivious to my existence, unaware that a shadowy creature had been lurking in the depths, spying on you for 5 years. I could not wait any longer.
Jusha Musti.
Once he is gone, you can return to my side. You have finally approached me. You are even more endearing than I imagined. No one could possibly refuse you. The first time we met, I kissed you, soft and delicate, like a kitten, yet you claimed to prefer omegas. I recoiled. Why must it always be about gender? Is it my fault to be an enigma? I began to feign indifference towards you while secretly observing your every move. I noticed how you hummed while bathing, how your pajamas featured teddy bears, how you favored triangular underwear. Watching your every action brought me immense joy. I developed all your photographs, discreetly stashing away your unwashed clothes, imbued with your scent. I was exhilarated, filled with fervor. But you mentioned moving out? No, I cannot allow that. I have struggled to keep you by my side, and no one, not even you, can take you away from me. This was the first time he had spoken such an extended monologue. He became incoherent thereafter. Pausing, he lifted his gaze, his eyes alight with a terrifying obsession. You are mine. You will not leave me, will you? Yes, I am yours. I answered him in my heart. To be honest, I did not concern myself with why he had fallen for me. What I desired was for him to love me eternally, exclusively. Yet the sight of him, like a pitiful child clutching onto candy, pleading for my affirmation, was a rarity. I could not resist teasing him. What if I were to say otherwise? He chuckled softly, his fingers caressing my cheek with a tenderness that was disarming. Yet, in the next moment, my chin was lifted, and my neck was grasped firmly. In Pei Yi's eyes bloomed a blood-red rose, laced with poison. If otherwise, then we shall die together. In death you would still be mine. I struggled to draw breath, laughing as I said, very well, let me perish in your embrace. He ensnared me with a kiss, akin to a serpent coiling around its prey. Little pervert. I playfully bit his tongue. Big pervert. Two perverts, destined to be a pair. The end. Thank you for listening. We shall meet again in the next tale.